Welcome back to the deep dive. You hand us the articles, the research, and the internal memos, and we jump in to deliver the critical insights you need, fast, clear, and actionable. Today, we are focusing on one of the most visible, high-stakes organizational transitions in recent memory.
Yeah.
Talking about the recent wave of senior leadership departures at Apple.
Right, late 2024, early 2025. You couldn't miss it.
Exactly. You've all seen the headlines. We're talking about these really high-profile names leaving from core functions, AI, industrial design, legal, environmental strategy, even global ops.
And the initial media story was, pretty simple, a talent retention crisis. But if you actually dig into the organizational sources, if you look at the patterns, that explanation just doesn't really hold up.
It's too simple.
Way too simple. I mean, when you see a cluster of senior exits across such different, unrelated domains, it's not just normal churn. It's a signal for something much, much bigger.
It's a strategic reset. We're calling this a cultural inflection point. It's this moment where a company is doing a deliberate and probably pretty painful organizational redesign. Apple built this incredible cultural operating system that was, perfect for the iPhone era. But now they have to retool that culture to face these huge strategic challenges.
Like ubiquitous AI integration, which is a massive one, but also complex global regulations, sustainability goals, the list goes on.
Right. And this is why you, the listener, should care. Apple struggled to find the right organizational blueprint. It offers a masterclass for any leader, really any organization that needs to pivot in a fast-moving market. So our mission today is to kind of extract that blueprint.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with reading the signals.
Yeah.
How do we tell the difference between this kind of systemic redesign and just, routine turnover, or a few people deciding to retire early?
The key is you're looking for strategic discontinuity, not just noise in the system. Routine turnover, it generally reinforces the way things are. But what we're seeing at Apple, it's evidence of an intentional clearing of the decks.
Oh.
Academics like Tushman and O'Reilly, they link this directly to preparing for something they call architectural innovation.
Okay, let's pause there. Architectural innovation. That sounds pretty technical. What does it actually mean for a company like Apple?
Yeah, it's a bit of jargon, but the idea is simple. It means the company isn't just making a slightly better iPhone. That would be, incremental innovation.
Just the next model.
Exactly. Architectural innovation demands new combinations of their existing skills. You have to totally reorganize how the engineers talk to the designers or how legal works with the AI research teams. It's a foundational shift.
And so the leaders who were amazing in that old architecture, they might not be the right people for the new one.
Precisely. They're not a good fit. So the pattern of who leaves is way more important than the individual personalities.
So when we look at our sources, there are basically 4 defining features that tell us this is an intentional redesign. Let's walk through them.
Okay, so the first one is its cross-functional scope. It's not just a problem in one division. The exits are spanning design and legal and operations.
Right. If they were just struggling with AI, you'd only see turnover in the AI division.
For sure. The breadth of it tells you the issue is systemic. The whole system is changing.
And the second one is senior level concentration.
Yes. These are leaders with real strategic influence. They have cultural authority. These are the people who basically defined how Apple operated for the last decade.
Okay, so that's 2. What's a third?
Third, and this is crucial, is the temporal clustering. All these transitions are happening within a few months, not spread out over years.
That compressed timeline, it signals urgency, doesn't it? It forces the whole organization to just face the change right now.
It does. And finally, number 4 is strategic timing alignment. The departures line up perfectly with these huge, inescapable market shifts. For Apple, it's the overwhelming demand for deep AI integration, which really challenges their famous hardware-first culture.
So when you see those 4 things together, cross-functional, senior level, clustered in time, and aligned with a strategy shift, it's a real pivot.
It's a real pivot. And, we can see this play out perfectly in a different industry with Microsoft under Satya Nadella. Between 2014 and 2017, they had major leadership changes across Windows, devices, enterprise.
From the outside, it probably looked like total instability.
It probably did. But it was exactly what they needed to enable that cultural shift.
I love that case study.
Right.
So what was this shift they were trying to make? What was the problem?
Well, they needed to move from an internal culture that was often described as, competitive, even zero-sum, where the Windows team fought the Office team for resources,
Right.
to a collaborative cloud-first ecosystem strategy. And those leadership changes allowed them to do what we call ambidextrous organizing.
Ambidextrous organizing,
Yeah.
which, in plain English, is basically learning how to walk and chew gum at the same time.
That's a great way to put it. Exactly. It's the ability to simultaneously exploit your existing strengths, like the massive Office user base, while also exploring totally new territory, like building out Azure cloud services.
And that takes a different kind of leader, a different set of values.
A completely different type of cross-functional leader. And that ability to be ambidextrous, that is precisely what Apple is trying to engineer right now.
Okay, so that's the signal. Let's talk about the risk. What happens when a company sees those signals but ignores them? They try to execute a new strategy with their old successful culture.
The organization basically levies a tax on its own growth. It's like trying to drive with the emergency brake on. We have longitudinal data that shows companies with this kind of culture strategy misalignment, they suffer a real performance penalty.
How much are we talking?
We're talking 20 to 30% lower revenue growth over the long run. It's this internal friction that just bleeds profit away.
And that friction, I imagine, it just slows everything down.
Yeah.
I mean, if the old culture valued perfect, closed-off industrial design above everything else,
Right.
and the new strategy needs rapid OpenAI collaboration, the whole decision-making process must just grind to a halt.
Absolutely. The research shows that this kind of misalignment can increase your decision cycle time by like 40 to 60%.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, imagine your teams wasting half their time just navigating internal turf wars instead of actually shipping a product. And then we also see what are called resource allocation distortions.
Meaning the money goes to the wrong places.
The money follows the old culture. If the assumption is that hardware excellence is sacred, the budget just instinctively flows there. That makes it incredibly hard to suddenly redirect massive necessary funds towards, say, cloud infrastructure or AI R&D.
It sounds like the successful culture develops its own kind of like organizational immune system.
That is the perfect analogy.
It just rejects the very innovation the company needs to survive because it looks foreign, doesn't look familiar.
And the most powerful warning sign here for Apple is the story of Nokia. Nokia had incredible engineering talent, just phenomenal. But their culture, it was so deeply engineering-centric that it prioritized hardware reliability.
The physical phone over software and building an app ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. It was the wrong focus at exactly the wrong time, right when the iPhone showed up. Their culture was perfectly aligned with the past.
And the result was a total market collapse.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it? From almost 50% market share down to...
Down to less than 3% in just 6 years, between 2007 and 2013. It shows you just how quickly a cultural mismatch can become lethal in a market that's moving that fast.
And there's a serious human toll here, too. I mean, if you're a top performer, you were hired and promoted because you were perfectly aligned with that old design-led vision. You must suddenly feel completely adrift when the company pivots and your priorities are suddenly irrelevant.
That role ambiguity, that feeling that your purpose is gone, it drives your best people out the door. Misalignment increases voluntary turnover by 15 to 25% among the very people who used to define success.
And it has to undermine the leaders, too.
Oh, it crushes leadership credibility.
Yeah.
It's really hard for a leader who embodied that hardware-first mentality to suddenly, authentically start advocating for a service-first strategy. The employees, they see the contradiction.
We saw that so tragically at General Electric. Jeff Immelt tried to push GE to become this digital industrial company, but the strategic shift just couldn't overcome the entrenched, siloed GE culture.
And the market saw it. Their market cap declined by nearly 30% over his tenure because they just could not close that culture strategy gap.
So the lesson here isn't just about how badly things can fail. It's about how intentional you have to be when you rebuild.
Exactly. For you, the listener, the key is to get that successful organizational transitions are designed. You don't just stumble into them. So let's look at the evidence-based frameworks for actually building that adaptive capacity.
Okay, so we've seen the risk. Let's build the solution. Where's the starting line for a successful cultural redesign?
It always starts with communication, specifically what we call sense-giving leadership. The leader's job isn't just to announce a new strategy. It's to explain why the change is necessary, to give meaning to all the chaos while still protecting the core identity of the company.
So how does a company actually do that? How do you communicate a dual narrative without sounding like you're contradicting yourself? It's tough to say, everything you did was brilliant, but now we're going to do the opposite.
It is a delicate balance. You have to honor the achievements of the past while being crystal clear about the needs of the future. And Nadella's leadership at Microsoft is really the gold standard here.
Also,
His extensive listening tours, his clear, consistent memos, they helped the entire organization internalize the why behind the change. And that communication, it wasn't just a PR exercise, it was a foundational strategic asset. Look at the result. Market cap went from around $300 billion in 2014 to over $2 trillion by 2023.
wow. Okay, so communication is number one. What's the next critical piece of the architecture?
Procedural justice.
Right.
This is so critical for keeping the employees who stay. Research shows that people are way more accepting of a difficult outcome if they feel the process used to get there was fair and transparent.
So that means things like advanced signaling, transparent timelines, giving people a chance to voice their concerns.
Yes, and it also means treating the departing leaders with absolute dignity.
Right.
A dignified exit process signals to everyone who's left that the company values its people even when priorities have to shift. Adobe's pivot to the subscription-based Creative Cloud is a great example of this.
What did they do?
They did extensive internal consultation, they were super transparent, and that built a ton of trust. And it worked. Their annual recurring revenue just exploded, from $1.4 billion in 2012 to over $15 billion by 2023.
Okay, so after communication and justice, we've got to talk about skills. How do you build new capabilities without making your current employees feel like they're obsolete?
You have to frame the new skills as expansions, not replacements. The goal is what we call capability building. You want to keep that institutional knowledge while you invest in the new stuff.
And how do you do that in practice?
This is where things like rotational assignments and mentor-mentee reciprocity become so valuable. You pair an employee who has that deep institutional knowledge with a new hire who brings in the fresh, necessary skills.
IBM used this strategy brilliantly when they pivoted from being a hardware company to services and consulting.
They did. They retrained their engineers, they created these hybrid roles, and it allowed them to hold on to that enormous knowledge base. Fast forward to 2023, and over half of IBM's revenue is coming from software and consulting. That's a fundamental metamorphosis, and it was achieved through intentional internal development.
And of course, that new culture has to be reinforced by the structure of the company.
It has to be. There's this idea, Galbraith's law, that says if the organization's structure contradicts the stated culture, the structure always wins, every time.
So you have to change who has decision-making power. You have to change what you measure and reward.
Exactly. If you start rewarding individual heroics when you're preaching collaboration, you've already failed.
This sounds like a huge challenge for Apple, which is famous for its traditionally siloed divisions, hardware versus software.
It is. The reports about their struggles with AI integration suggest their structure might be fighting the very collaboration their new strategy requires.
So what's the counterexample?
Look at Amazon. They created these autonomous business units, like AWS, with completely distinct cultural norms and decision rights from the retail side.
Right, because AWS needed a culture focused on enterprise reliability, which is totally different from e-commerce speed.
Exactly. And that structural autonomy is what allowed AWS to grow to over $90 billion in annual revenue. It's proof that your structure has to enable your strategy.
And none of this happens for free. These shifts require dedicated resources, dedicated money.
Oh, absolutely. These transitions have to be properly funded, or they just become this prolonged, demoralizing adjustment period. The sources we looked at recommend allocating, say, 2 to 5% of your operating budget, specifically for this transition architecture.
And that includes things like retention bonuses for key people and generous exit packages.
Yes, and we saw this kind of dedication during the Ford transformation under Alan Mulally. When they were on the brink of bankruptcy, he didn't cut back on leadership development or collaboration efforts. He saw that rebuilding the culture was a strategic necessity, not some optional luxury.
And that investment is what let them avoid bankruptcy and get back to profitability by 2009.
It was. Which brings us to the final point. Building permanent adaptive capacity. It's not enough to survive one pivot. You have to institutionalize the ability to do it again and again.
How do you actually operationalize an idea like that?
Well, first, you have to transparently renegotiate the psychological contract. That's the unwritten set of expectations between an employee and the company. Leaders have to be clear that in an era of constant change, that relationship, what's expected, what's promised, is always evolving.
Like what Netflix does with its famous culture deck. They keep revising it.
That's a very public form of this transparent contract recalibration. And then finally, you have to institutionalize learning, not just, one-off training sessions, but systems that make organizational learning a routine part of doing business.
Like the U.S. Army's after-action review process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You normalize this deep routine examination of what happened, why it happened, and what you can learn. You're building an organizational memory that feeds every future decision, and that helps you maintain what we call purpose stability.
So Apple's core mission of enriching lives through technology, that can stay the same.
It can stay the same even as the strategies shift from focusing on hardware to focusing on AI services.
This deep dive gives us a completely different lens for looking at what's been happening at Apple. It's not about finding the perfect replacement talent. It's about a necessary, painful, and very deliberate organizational redesign.
Mm. Their long-term success is going to depend less on finding the one perfect strategy and much more on developing the cultural capacity to execute whatever strategy they choose.
So the lesson for every practitioner is clear. Recognize these clustered departure patterns early. Don't just hope the misalignment will fix itself.
And transparently invest in the full transition architecture, the communication, the justice, the structural realignment. You have to build this adaptive capacity throughout the whole organization, not just rely on a few heroic leaders at the top.
So here is the final thought for you to chew on. Stable equilibrium states, these moments where strategy and culture are perfectly aligned forever, they're basically a myth now. They are increasingly implausible in our current technological landscape.
The organizations that are truly going to thrive in the decades to come will be the ones that treat cultural adaptation as a permanent, funded, and measurable organizational capability rather than just a temporary disruption.
And that's a deep dive. We'll see you next time.